Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was just an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day that blends together with all the others. I had my coffee, sat down at my desk, and started the usual routine, checking emails, replying to messages, and tackling tasks that never seemed to end. At 43, life had become predictable in a way I had grown comfortable with. I had my routine, my friends, my job. Everything felt, well, safe. But that afternoon, something happened that I couldn't have predicted, not in a million years. The phone rang. It was an unknown number, which I almost never answer. But for some reason, I picked up. "Hello," I said, feeling a little more cautious than usual. "Hi, is this Sarah Turner?" came the voice on the other end. It was smooth, professional, and just familiar enough to make my heart skip a beat. I froze for a second before responding. "Yes, speaking." "This is Mark Johnson, your boss. How are you today?" "Mark?" "Mark Johnson, my boss at the marketing firm I've been working at for the past 12 years. I hadn't expected a call from him, let alone one that would stir a nervous excitement in my chest. "I'm good, just working through the usual stuff. How about you, Mark?" There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the shuffle of papers or maybe fingers tapping against a desk. I couldn't quite place it, but something about the way he hesitated made me uneasy. "I'm doing well, Sarah. But listen, I wanted to talk to you about something important." My stomach did a little flip. Important? We weren't due for any performance reviews, and we had just wrapped up the big project with the client. So why the call? My mind raced through a dozen possibilities, none of them good. "Is everything okay?" I asked, suddenly feeling an odd lump in my throat. There was a chuckle on the other end, but it wasn't lighthearted. It was tense. "Everything's fine, don't worry. Actually, it's better than fine. I think you'll be pleased to hear this." I exhaled, trying to calm myself. Was he about to give me a raise or offer me a big new opportunity? Maybe he wanted me to take on more responsibility. The possibilities seemed endless, but at the same time, nothing about the conversation felt natural. Why was he calling me like this? Why the serious tone? It was strange. "Okay," I said, trying to steady my nerves. "What's going on?" "Well, Sarah, we've been looking at your performance over the past year. I have to say, you've really exceeded expectations. And I've got something to offer you, something I think you might be interested in." Okay, now I was intrigued. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I couldn't help the excitement building up inside me. Could this be a promotion? A new project with more visibility? "Go on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, how would you feel about taking on a new role in the company? One that's a bit more exclusive." My heart raced. A new role, something exclusive? I had to admit, I hadn't even considered the possibility of a new role. I was comfortable where I was. But my curiosity was piqued. I needed to know more. "What do you mean by exclusive?" I asked. He laughed, this time with a bit more warmth, but it still sounded different. "Well, I can't go into too many details just yet, but this opportunity would put you in the spotlight. You'd be representing the company on a new project that could really take your career to the next level. It would involve a lot of travel, meetings with high-level clients, and of course, you'd be working directly with me." I felt my heart skip a beat. This was unexpected. I had been working hard, yes, but I hadn't anticipated anything like this. I'd been content with the day-to-day, but what he was describing sounded like a chance to break free from the mundane, a chance to really stretch my wings. "Wow, that sounds amazing," I said, a bit breathlessly. Mark's voice softened. "It is. And I think you're ready for it, Sarah. You've been with us for a long time, and I believe this is the next step for you. But before I go any further, I want to make sure it's something you actually want to do. It would be a big commitment, a lot of responsibility. I won't lie. It's not an easy path. I leaned back in my chair, processing his words. A part of me felt a spark of excitement, but another part felt a little nervous. It was a lot to consider. But when had I ever backed down from something challenging? When had I ever turned down an opportunity to grow? What kind of commitment are we talking about? I asked, my voice steady. Mark took a deep breath before responding. Well, it's going to require a lot of your time, Sarah. There will be some personal sacrifices, and I need someone I can trust completely for this. No room for second guessing. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. The stakes were high, and I knew it. But something inside me, maybe it was a mix of curiosity, desire for growth, or just the plain excitement of being noticed, pushed me forward. I understand. I'm interested, I said, my voice confident, though my mind was still racing. Mark paused again, as if weighing something. Then, in a tone that felt almost conspiratorial, he said, Good. Then I have one more thing to tell you. Mark's voice lowered, and there was an almost eerie stillness on the line. For a moment, I thought I had imagined the pause, but then he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. Before we proceed, Sarah, I need to be honest with you about something. I sat up straighter, my hand tightening around the phone. This wasn't just about the job anymore. There was something else, something more personal, hanging in the air. I could feel it, a subtle shift in the conversation that made me uneasy, though I couldn't yet pinpoint why. Of course, I replied, my voice tight with anticipation. What's going on? He sighed. It wasn't the kind of sigh that came from a man who was burdened by paperwork or business decisions. No, this one was heavier, like a weight he had been carrying for a long time. Sarah, I've been following your work closely, more closely than you probably realize, he said. And I've noticed something about you. Something special. His words caught me off guard. I'd worked hard over the years, but I had never thought of myself as special in that sense. Yes, I was good at my job, but I was just another cog in the machine, wasn't I? Nothing extraordinary. But Mark's tone, sincere, almost intimate, made me second-guess that. Mark, I appreciate the praise, but... I started to protest, but he cut me off gently. No, Sarah, you need to hear me out. I don't mean this in a professional sense alone, he said, his voice thick with meaning. I'm talking about something. More? My stomach flipped again. More? I echoed, barely able to keep my voice steady. The whole situation was starting to feel strange. Was he suggesting something beyond a career opportunity? Was I misinterpreting his words? My heart started to race, and I felt the old, familiar anxiety creeping in. It was something I hadn't felt in years, being vulnerable, unsure, off balance. Yes, he replied. I've been working with you for so long, Sarah, and I've come to realize that you are more than just an employee. I see potential in you, not just in the office, but beyond that. Mark, I began again, trying to make sense of his cryptic words, but he kept going, his voice taking on a softer, almost confessional tone. I know this might sound strange, but I've developed a deep respect for you. Not just because of your work ethic, but because of who you are as a person. The way you carry yourself, your values, your integrity. There's something about you that makes me believe we could accomplish more together, if you understand what I mean. His words hung in the air, making the world around me feel like it had slowed to a crawl. I was trying to make sense of what he was saying, but the line between professional admiration and something more felt blurred. Was I reading too much into this? Was he crossing a line? I don't know what to say, I muttered, feeling conflicted. There was a part of me that wanted to dismiss his words, but another part, a part I couldn't quite control, felt the warmth in his voice. There was an undeniable pull, like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite define but was desperately curious to explore. I know it's unexpected, and I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now, he continued, his tone still gentle but tinged with a hint of urgency. I just needed you to know how I feel. And well, I hope you might feel the same way, even if it's just a little bit." My heart was pounding in my chest now. I felt like I was being asked to make a choice, but the weight of his words had left me stunned. I had been flattered by his praise, yes, but this was different. This was personal, and it felt like I was stepping into unfamiliar territory. I'd been in relationships before, but this wasn't something I had prepared for. "Mark, I started, but once again I couldn't finish the thought. What could I possibly say to that? How could I navigate this delicate situation, especially with him being my boss? "I know this isn't easy," Mark said, sensing my hesitation. "I've thought long and hard about how to approach you, but I had to be honest. I didn't want to hide my feelings any longer." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding, trying to compose myself. The office, the job, the responsibility, it all felt so far away now. All that remained was the weight of his words, the way he saw me, the way he made me feel seen. "I don't know what to say, Mark," I finally whispered, my voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "This is a lot to take in." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and for a moment I wondered if I had said too much. But then Mark's voice broke through the stillness, his tone lighter now, as though he was giving me the space I needed. "I'm not asking you to rush, Sarah. Just think about it. Take your time, and when you're ready, let me know." I let out a shaky breath, trying to steady my emotions. "Okay," I said quietly, my mind swirling. "I'll think about it." Mark seemed to sense my hesitation, and I could almost hear the faint smile in his voice. "I knew you would. And no matter what you decide, I'll respect it. I just wanted you to know where I stand." As the call ended, I sat there in a daze. What had just happened? Was I being swept up in something I couldn't control? Or had I just been given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to grow, both personally and professionally? I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I had been changed in that moment. Something inside me had awakened, and no matter what I decided, I could never go back to the person I was before that call. The days after that call passed by in a blur, each one more chaotic than the last. I went through the motions of my daily routine, meetings, emails, deadlines, but everything felt different. My mind kept returning to that conversation with Mark, replaying his words over and over. I couldn't escape the question that had taken root in my mind. What did he really mean? What did I want? I found myself caught between two worlds, one where I was just a 43-year-old woman trying to balance work, responsibilities, and personal life, and another where I was someone he saw as something more. I couldn't ignore the feelings that had started to bloom within me. The respect I'd always had for Mark, now laced with curiosity and something else I couldn't fully identify. But as the days passed, something shifted inside of me. I realized I had been running away from the very thing I feared the most, the idea of stepping outside my comfort zone. I'd spent so many years being practical, following the expected path. But maybe it was time to take a leap, to embrace the unknown. After all, what was the worst that could happen? A chance at something new, something real, was worth the risk, wasn't it? I decided I needed to speak with Mark face to face. A phone call wasn't enough to unravel everything that had been set in motion. I needed clarity, and I knew I could only get it by confronting my feelings head-on. I called his office and asked if he had time to meet. The moment he agreed, my stomach twisted with nerves. What if I said the wrong thing? What if this changed everything between us for good? The next morning, I arrived at the office early, pacing outside in the parking lot, taking deep breaths to steady myself. When I finally walked into his office, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Mark was sitting at his desk, but he stood up as soon as he saw me. His smile was warm, reassuring, but there was a slight edge to it, as though he too had been waiting for this moment. "Sarah," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," I began, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. "And I need to be honest with you. I'm not sure where this will lead, but I can't ignore how I feel. You've given me a lot to think about, Mark, and I've realized that what I want is to take that risk." Mark's eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his expression. It was as though he had been holding his breath, waiting for my response, and now that it had come, he allowed himself a brief moment of relief. "You mean it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes, I mean it." There was a long silence as we stood there, the weight of the moment settling between us. It felt like a turning point, a moment of pure, unspoken understanding. And then Mark stepped closer, his hand reaching out tentatively, as if testing the waters. It wasn't a grand gesture, but there was something deeply meaningful in the way he held my gaze, waiting for me to make the next move. I took a deep breath and took a step forward. The tension between us, once thick with uncertainty, now felt like a bridge, leading us towards something neither of us could fully predict. But in that moment, it didn't matter. We were both willing to step into the unknown together. "Sarah," Mark said, his voice a little more certain now, "I never wanted to pressure you. I just needed you to know how I felt." "I know," I replied softly. "And I'm glad you did." His smile grew, genuine and warm. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I'm willing to find out if you are." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever this was, whatever it would become, I was ready. Not just for the professional risks, but for the personal discovery that came with taking a chance on someone who saw me for more than just my work, for all that I was. As we stood there, a mutual understanding passing between us, I realized that the real journey wasn't just about stepping into a new chapter with Mark. It was about embracing the uncertainty of life and allowing myself to be vulnerable, to connect, to grow, and to discover parts of myself that I had hidden for too long. The weeks that followed weren't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the line between professional and personal felt blurry. But through it all, Mark and I maintained a mutual respect that anchored us. Our relationship, whether it remained professional or evolved into something more, was built on a foundation of trust and understanding. And for once in my life, I wasn't afraid of where it would take me. As I walked out of his office that day, I felt a quiet sense of pride. I had made a decision that was mine and mine alone, and that, more than anything, made me realize just how much I had grown. This was my story, one of vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to step into the unknown. And whatever came next, I knew I was ready.